Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Administrative Services Committee meeting for March 31st, 2025. Present this evening are myself, I'm the chair, Craig Cobb, the vice chair, Councilmember Jim Pretras, vice president, or rather president Tony Kuda, and also joining us at the table are council members Jim Posh and Gil Larson. The first order of business is to review the legislation that was reviewed to this committee, that being ordinance number 023-2025. This is our annual ordinance establishing salary schedules, position classifications, and other compensation for employees. And this was referred to us last month. Typically, we look to have salaries with any increases become effective April 1st, 2025. So we do want to do what we can to make some recommendations to the body of council. So hopefully we can vote on this in April. And with that, I would open it up to any comments or discussions that any members have. And then at the end, I'll share some thoughts that I have. And also as part of this conversation, if anyone has any comments about the Archer study. Start off. You don't need to wait to be recognized. Go ahead.
Well, technically not a member of the committee. I mean, I really only have one suggestion, and it's under section 4, elected officials, where there was a mayor's salary of $150,000. I was thinking that it would be initially, I was going to propose legislation that was discussed with the law department, and I think it was briefly mentioned in a meeting before we received this survey, of having a two-tiered salary for the mayor, one of them being a lower salary for just sort of like the base. I believe the base right now is 110. What's being proposed is 150. And then an increase. 115, okay, 115. It's being proposed to raise that to 150. I was thinking that just as an encouragement to make sure people who run for office have an MBA or an advanced degree of some kind, we would put a step increase to go from some number to a larger number. Now, maybe 150 is good enough. I still would love to see a step increase of maybe another $20,000 on top of that. It's not that big of a deal to me, but I mean, I can certainly live with the 150. The bigger issue I have is the council president amount. Sorry, President Kuda. But although when we vote on this, there's a Ohio revised code where we can't take these salaries once we vote on them. We have to have our existing salary. Because we can't technically vote for a salary increase for ourselves. But the 16,000, creates it's at the limit where there's a different level of reporting that has to happen with the Ethics Commission. And the big difference is right now with the Ethics Commission, I'll use myself as an example, you have to put all your investments, everything that you own, anything that you have a right, any things that are valuable, you have to essentially list. And if it's 16 or less, if it's under 16, you could just list them. If it's over 16 or at 16, you have to put dollar amounts next to them. And I will tell you that is a very difficult undertaking. It just seems to me that I would like to see that 16 number a little bit lower. I mean, I certainly can see if you're making 20, 30, 40, 50, $150,000, that level of interest. But for someone to know how much, for example, Apple stock I have, the value of that just seems like it's a little excessive for a council member who, not necessarily me, but any council member that would be president. I think it would deter someone from wanting to run for council, and I wouldn't see that.
Or at least being council president.
Or being council president.
Yeah. So can I, a couple
Yes.
of things? So let me just talk about the rationale for the initial salary schedule. So when this was charged to a small group of us by the then council president to look at salaries across the county, like in similar sized suburbs, and come up with a salary. This is before anybody was running for mayor or anything. And the 115 was in that spot. I mean, it actually had been proposed 120, and then council. So the recommendation to council at that time, this is probably 2021, or maybe a little before that. And the rationale was, and council decided on the 115. They lowered it $5,000. The credentials for a city administrator were so much higher. You know, mayor, you have to be 18 and you have to be registered to vote. You know, that's really not what I'd call a credentialed position. The city administrator, on the other hand, it's education, it's relevant experience, and so forth. And so that's why the salary was higher for the city administrator, because the actual job description was a lot more demanding. I know that the law director was, I don't know if he said anything about the legal part of it, but about tiering it, was somebody said they were not enamored with that idea. Do you recall?
It's not, it's custom, it's in the school world, you see that. But in the elected mayor, you don't necessarily see that.
Yeah, but I don't remember who said what about. I remember somebody saying something about that. You know, it's not a good idea. Reasons, I don't know. Was it you?
No.
Okay. On the council president thing, I can just tell you that it is a lot more work. It's not a little bit more work than a council person. I want to encourage people to do it in the future. You know, I don't need to ever be part of any raises of any kind. You know, I signed up for this and I'm fine to ride that out. But I'm just thinking about, you know, when you're asking somebody to do a lot more work, you know, I remember when I was teaching, you know, people who had 2 preps a day and people who had 3 preps a day, people who had 3 preps worked a lot harder than people who had 2 preps. You know, they didn't get paid anymore. That's kind of a problem. You know, when you say do 33% more work than the person sitting next to you and you don't compensate them, and I mean, it's measurable. I'm talking about a measurable amount of more work. And I think, you know, if what we're looking for is to attract people to do this work, I think we have to think about that.
Do you think that floor changes, like with inflation and cost of living, et cetera? Does it stay the same all the time?
I think it's been the same for a while, but I can check.
And that can be addressed in the charter. You know, that's what Congress did. They said, you know, we get a COLA every year, so we keep our hands off of it just goes with that. And that's something we talked about in the Charter Review Commission.
You know, I guess what I would propose is dropping both the council and the council presidency salary by, let's say, $500 or $200. That's the kind of.
Yeah, I know what you're proposing. I'm just saying, here's the other side. That's all.
Any other comments on those salaries? I'm a little troubled by having 2 highly compensated positions in this city and having comparable salaries between the mayor at $150 and a city administrator at $150. Shaker's mayor is going to $103,000 by comparison. And they do have the city administrator, and I think our recollection was we were trying to model at least having the city administrator and a mayor based on Shaker. I don't know of any other communities of our size that have 2 highly compensated persons handling the mayor and the administrator job. The council salaries, I guess I'm personally uncomfortable raising our salaries, even though I think an increase is warranted. Lakewood is currently, their council members are at 13,000, and for their next terms, they're going to 15,600. And Shaker is currently at 10,400, and they're going to 12,500.
Does it say?
January
Does
26th.
it talk about the council president and the council, you know?
No,
maybe just-
I didn't look to see if there were any disparities between the council member and the council president. I know that does, the council president position here, particularly when we had a city manager, it was a lot of additional work having to prepare the agenda. I think there has been, for a variety of reasons, a lot more additional work for all of council, including the president, than has previously been the case in the city. But I'm going to go along with whatever the rest of council or this committee wants to do on these salaries. I think it does make sense to drop the president down a little bit, so you're not having to file, not you, whoever's the president's not having to file a detailed ethics statement every year.
Just so you know, the mayor of South Euclid is now at 115. Now that's brand new. She was at 90 for 14 years.
Isn't the Shaker mayor part-time?
Technically,
So it really doesn't, it's hard to compare those two?
but none of them have worked part-time for 40 years.
Right.
They've all, and I've actually somehow known all the mayors in Shaker, not for any particular reason, and they've all worked full-time.
I guess, my issue is if we're going to pay a mayor $150,000, then I'm not sure that we ought to be paying a city administrator a comparable salary.
You'll never get anybody for less.
One thing that I noticed from Exhibit 1 from the results of the Archer survey is the difference between the market midpoint and the proposed midpoints. So in a lot of cases, the proposed midpoints were actually lower than the market midpoint. And what stuck out to me was that the proposed midpoint for mayor and for the IT director is about 20% higher than the market midpoint. That's something that stuck out to me. So I'm wondering, what is it about working in the city of Cleveland Heights that would justify those positions being 20% higher than the market midpoints?
I don't know, were you just tossing that out for a comment versus,
I think so.
okay. Pertaining to some of the wording and the provisions that are in the salary ordinance, I had a couple of, I think, suggestions that I'm going to want to make, starting at page 7. And this would be section 12D, which is deferred compensation plans, and D provides, in order to encourage and reward extraordinary employee dedication and performance, the mayor may award a particular employee additional non-hyphen salary compensation through contributions to an employee's deferred compensation account. I would like to add a provision making that subject to council approval. And that's just not because of the current situation. I believe that it has the potential for abuse. And also at page 10, section 22G, the mayor shall have the authority, when deemed in the best interest of the city, to issue a cost of living adjustment in the form of a one-time lump sum payment to an employee. I would also like to add language making that subject to council approval as well. I do know that in the past, when we had a city manager and compensation outside of the normal package was being made, she did come to council, or he would come to council and run that by council before doing it, or at least give them notice of what was happening. Also, if you'll recall at our last meeting, and this is on the documents that are posted, I proposed that we increase the compensation to our boards from the current $90 to $115, and that we add the Landmark Commission as a compensated board, if everyone is good with that. And then if you'll recall, I had some provisions on here addressing salary disparities with our police and fire chiefs. And I invited both chiefs to come to the meeting this evening to shed some light on that. Chief Harry sent me an email. He was unable to make it, but he proposed a salary differential along the lines of what is in South Euclid, which is a 14% differential. And Chief, if you could come up to the desk and share with us your particular situation and you're pay expert as well.
I brought him. He's a union member as well, so he's to answer or provide any information about the CBA. But just for the record, I want to start off. I know it was mentioned by Mr. Cobb in a previous meeting that when the fire chief, when he was offered the job, there might have been hesitation or reservation, and I acknowledge and recognize my salary and benefits were put in place before the current administration. So, but I want to take the time to thank the mayor and you all for this opportunity to speak, as the Archer study played out. But just to give you a little background, certainly I'm a proud and honorable member of this police department. It's my home. Been here 30 years. I'm highly dedicated, motivated, and loyal to the city, to the community, and the police department. So when I was certainly grateful and humble when I asked to be the police chief, but it didn't come without reservations. And the initial salary that was proposed, I talked with my significant other. I said, "Is this really worth it for me?" Knowing that, there wasn't going to be a pay differential, but gratefully, after some conversation, I was able to get a reasonable offer on my salary at that time. But as we all sit here, and again, appreciative of the outcome of the CBAs for the members of the department, but that necessarily didn't benefit me. But through my years, I've enjoyed the benefits of civil service, and I'm a civil service chief. Having the benefits of the sick time buyback at the end of the year. I don't abuse sick time. I barely call in sick. The comp time, the overtime, as you all can imagine, the huge amount of responsibility and liability I carry on a daily basis in my position. I'm certainly not downplaying or minimizing the other department heads or any member of my staff, any of my captains or lieutenants, because I know they put in a lot of extra time and effort and they get compensated. But in all actuality, everybody at the end of the day, not saying that they go home and get to leave it behind it. I'm really on duty 24/7, and I'm committed and dedicated to the department. I attend city events. I work events. I come in on the weekends and nights when there's a critical incident. I was there at the night of the fire with the mayor, getting bags of salt and spreading the salt out on the street so to help so everyone was safe. That's just one example. I'm there at most of the community events and help out on the side. But back to here now, it's just a matter of principle. So when the last CBA was approved last year, since April 1st, there currently is no pay difference between myself and a police captain. And the police captains, they get to enjoy, I think we're at currently at the pretty much same salary, but they get overtime, they get comp time. At the end of the year, they can cash in unused sick time for as a bonus, kind of stuff that I enjoyed over the years. And then most significant is the approval of upon retirement, they have a substantial increase in sick time they can buy back upon retirement. I certainly, would appreciate having that benefit as well for, years of service. So that's kind of where I'm at. Want to say anything, Sean? Longevity pay was another issue. I think it's been doubled for them since last year, but like I said, I've been kind of waiting out, for the Archer study to get done, and grateful for the chance to speak with you all.
Chief, could you send me an email on the details on the longevity and the sick buyback rather? Any other significant disparities between any benefits that you receive in your and the union members?
Yeah, you get that.
Yeah, I think he's not looking for any type of windfall, that's for sure. Just parity with what the union CBA is. So if you were to follow those terms and guidelines, that would be the similar type of increases that the chief is looking to sort of mirror or mimic. And that would be obviously the increase in sick leave payout at the time of separation, the same type of language that was used in there. So that's half or 50% of the sick time accumulated, the maximum of 2,000 hours. Therefore, the maximum payout that could be achieved is 1,000 hours. The hourly rate of payment for accrued sick leave shall be determined by the following formula, and there is a formula in that CBA contract. So in effect is your people that have an extended amount of time on that year in and year out do not call off sick. It is a little payout at the end of their career. So it helps us in the fact that officers know if they don't call in sick that there is going to be some compensation, and it also helps us because we don't have shift minimum, which if we did, people are calling off sick and they knew they weren't going to get compensated for that, it could cause a huge disparity in overtime. Again, like the chief said, he's not eligible for any type of overtime or even comp time, where if you stayed over 5-6 hours on some extraordinary event, he's not compensated for that. He is a salaried employee. So that further shows a disparity between the captains that do have that and the chief that doesn't. So if you look at that 13% differential or 14% aspirational by the fire chief, I know Chief Britton was looking more at what our CBA is, which was 13%. If you look at all the other added stuff that the captains get, that dwindles down to maybe 4% differential. So again, we're trying to keep within the Archer guidelines. That would not put him at the super high end of that. It would put him between the median and the higher end of that. And by the time all this gets done and other people that we're looking at, other departments, they're going to be renegotiating their contracts here shortly. So those chiefs will be probably getting some type of compensation raise at that point too. So in looking at those salaries, we're looking at them right now. And we are a little bit behind most of those people with regards to our CBAs. As we waited, a little bit extra time, it took us about 8 months to get our current CBA in place. So they're going to start negotiating again. So with all that being considered, I think if you look at similarly situated chiefs, which I think span of control of supervision and the amount of officers would be similar to not some of the smaller departments that Archer used, but cities like Euclid, where his base salary is about $150,000. So just in looking at that, if you could just think of span of control and also for supervision and the amount of officers, 196, 92. If we get up to where we want to be, it's a lot more officers that than Chief Britton. And also some of those other departments, I might add, is they have assistant police chiefs that could maybe take a little bit of the burden off, whereas we do not have an assistant police chief currently. Thank you.
Sure, if I'm reading the contract right, it has the captain's salary effective last April at $126,445,000.
Correct.
It's going up tomorrow to $130,871.
Correct. During that same time frame, the chief was making $123,599.
So the chief his base salary is less.
Correct.
And that's been the case for over a year.
Correct. And those
His
captains
earning will
also
increase, yeah.
correct. And those captains also got retro pay. So they got from April 1st of 24 when our contract is actually up. So they got a retro pay that was included in that.
Okay. And so looking at South Euclid's legislation, I'm thinking of adding to our current ordinances 139.26 that would provide for a compensation and a percentage amount over the captain's base pay rate in the collective bargaining agreement. So that would get adjusted every year, a percentage. I don't know what the appropriate percentage amount is. You're suggesting, or not suggesting, you're pointing out it's 13% difference between the captains, the lieutenants, and the sergeants.
Correct.
And if we carried that over, then we would have 13% salary differential. Does anyone have any thoughts on that? And doing something similar in the fire department? And the fire department has an assistant chief, so whatever that percentage increase would be, it would be half that for the fire chief. And so I'll get something drafted up and sent to the law department if everyone is all right with the concept of doing that.
I want to
Yes.
ask a question about, so this concept of having an assistant chief of police, was that brought up in the director chief meetings when the budget hearings, not budget hearings, but when you guys had budget talks, departmental talks?
I recall having a brief conversation with the mayor about it, but nothing, nothing substantive or
So was
official.
it brought up and rejected, or just brought up and not followed through?
I think it was just a general conversation about, what it would look like to have a deputy chief or assistant chief here, and it was just.
I'm taking some administrative work that, kind of busy work that you do that you could
Right.
to offload.
Yeah, it just never came to fruition, full-scale topic discussion about it, see what it would look like or what I needed to do.
Okay.
Other departments, Shaker, they have assistant chiefs.
Yes, I believe so.
I'm certain that they do.
Yeah.
And I know, for example, in the Public Works, they have more than one assistant director. And we're just bringing on one assistant director. I'm just I'm the newest council member here at the table. So is it, I'm shocked for two reasons. I want to talk about the Archer survey and what you're bringing on, but just when it comes to sort of the number two person, sort of having a good backup. We were talking in our finance committee meetings, and it was recommended to us cities this size have deputy finance directors. And we sort of saw the need for that over the last couple of months, where we really needed to have a backup person in that role. I'm a little surprised that we don't have that organizational structure. It's probably beyond our role as a council. We can fund these things. But when do we start cutting chiefs out? Deputy chiefs, has that I mean, was it done as a cost-saving thing over time, or just historically Cleveland Heights never had that?
We had a deputy chief under Chief Robertson, from what I recall, under Chief Mecklenburg.
Oh.
There
pretty
was
recent.
discussion about it with Director Smith, but we had, my understanding, there would have to be a similar process such as testing, examinations. So I never pursued that under Chief Mecklenburg, or it was never pursued kind of under the pretense while we're here, there was no benefit or motivation to become a deputy chief. You know, at one point I had brought it up and asked for it, but I would be considered a department head and I would lose all those other benefits. And I said, I'll stay where I'm at.
Yeah, I'm sorry, just to follow up, our salary ordinances have authorized those positions, and the new salary ordinance has an assistant police chief if the administration decided to fill it. The same with the finance. There's been an assistant director finance position with a salary grade, and that has been the case under the prior salary ordinances. I saw her first, yeah.
Thank you. I wanna fix this. I really wanna fix this. This isn't fair. It's not paying him for the responsibility he carries.
Yes,
And
yeah.
bringing on those other two benefits of longevity pay and sick leave buyout. Why not?
And for the last year, he's been making less than his captains.
Yeah. And we need
So
to
is that
fix
something that we want to address
a retro,
as well,
possibly?
to make him whole? And to the extent that this applies to the fire chief, who's not here tonight, to do the same for that person.
We'd have to.
Although the salary disparity is not, it's not as large with the fire department as it is with our police department. I had another thought and I lost it. You had a question?
So the classifications exist, but do we need to fund those positions? So salary grades may be there, but I don't think that we funded them in the 16 new positions that we created. So we may need to appropriate more money for them.
To the extent that we have so many positions that are unfilled, we're
Yeah,
what,
it
a
does.
quarter through the year. I mean, there is money, I'm assuming, from these unfilled positions in
That's not
all of these departments to handle that, I believe, but certainly whatever the mayor needs to fund these positions, we need these people, we would do it. Anything else? I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so one of the things when it comes to the budget, you may recall that there was some budget cutting that was made, specific in regarding healthcare and stuff, and it was actually, this was a concern sort of in the interest of passing the budget. It's not that we overlooked it, but we had to pass a budget. But decreases were made in certain items like hospitalization to account for what our current run rate was for hospitalization. It did not take into consideration a full load of 100% filled positions. So we will have to make some adjustments to deal with that.
Well, decreases were made in the estimates, not in, I mean, I don't know what reality is. We will find that out at the end of the year, but that was just a decrease in the estimated expenditures.
Yeah.
And it was, I mean,
There was no rationale given to it.
no, actually, of the 20 odd decreases, that one did have a rationale. There was a kind of set pattern of like this happened this year, then this happened this year, this happened this year, therefore. But again, I mean, without getting way in the weeds, Tara Schuster was our financial analyst. But at the time she was doing the budget, she was doing 4 jobs.
Right.
So I always like to, just as a council person, when you're looking over the budget, you want to see what the professional that put the budget in front of you, what their numbers were, because they go through a process that's beyond, what we can do. And they come up with a number. So I am it's not to correct you, but I just want to be specific about how that change came about and what it actually is. It's an estimated
Yeah,
change.
it's an estimated, but it wasn't based on a certain number of employee counts. It was based on what the current run rate was. And
That's true.
and I suppose there was rationale. I guess any number that gets put forward to us, there's some rationale to it. But we really didn't have the opportunity to really talk through it and really realize, because one of the things is usually cities get some savings out of unfilled positions, because you can never keep all the positions filled. There's always going to be, 1 or 2%. I mean, we were at 50 people at one point, and do you know off the top?
That's like 10 or 12%.
I mean, how many officers are you down right now? Still
As I said here, down 10.
down 10 out of approximate 100, 110?
90,
Wait, 105 is the magic number, right?
I thought it changed. Yeah,
Oh.
I think you might, 105, but we're in the low 90s right now.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, well then,
I think we need to fix this. I mean, there's clearly an issue. I've been bothered from day one. We don't have an HR director that can manage this.
see,
And
that's
it
the other
just,
thing.
The one thing that I think would be prudent to do is, before we do vote on it, to get the financial impact and cost from our finance department. So I'm going to send them with a request to run calculations, adding the benefits, and then a 10% and a 13% for police, and then a 10 or a 14% for the fire, to see what the financial differences are. So at 10%, if my calculations are correct, would result in a base salary of about 144 for the chief of police, and a 13% would be 148 approximately. For the fire chief, 10% would be 129, and a 14% would be 133,774. It's not. Go ahead.
Could you target this as a separate amendment to the budget so it doesn't get lost in all the figures, or do you want to incorporate this particular adjustment in the legislation? And secondly, can we add those two benefits of longevity pay and sick leave buyout? Can council do that?
Budget adjustments would likely be necessary, but my proposal is we add these provisions to the existing city ordinances
Okay,
in chapter 139. So we would add 139.26 compensation of police chief, 139.27 compensation of fire chief and assistant fire chief. And then based upon the University Heights provision, I'd add a further chapter, a further provision of 139 that basically says that there shall be entitled to the same longevity pay and other benefits as if they were a union member.
and then retro included in the adjustment as well.
I think we may need to do that by a resolution. Let me find out what the best way to do that after consulting with the law department. But I think that, it's going to impact more the police chief than the fire chief. Anything else on that? Before we move on, are we going to make a recommendation on this salary ordinance that we want to pass on to all of council? Or do we want to refrain from doing that and have a discussion in committee of the whole about that?
Well, let me ask Gail something. At your finance committee meeting on Wednesday,
Yeah,
right, is Director Hairston coming to that?
I don't know.
Oh. And the only reason I say that is, if you send him an email and you say, hey, let's look at that, I thought maybe he could report that out. But I guess it's a moot point if we don't know.
I don't know if he can get that done
No,
this
it's
quick, but I think the important part is that I think the recommendation from this committee should be to go forward with amending our chapter 139 to add compensation for the police chief and the fire chief, and we'll add those benefits. And that'll be done outside of the salary ordinance, and it's something that we won't have to be doing every year. It'll just be tied into that, and then we'll have to put a cap on that based upon the high end of the pay band, which it'll take a while to get there if I'm explaining that correctly.
And then what do we want to do with the mayor's salary and the council's salary?
I don't want to make a recommendation on that. I mean, that's just me. If you guys want to make a recommendation on the 150, again, I'm troubled that we're paying that much for a mayor and a city administrator for a city of our size.
Just for context, when we had a city administrator and an assistant city administrator, they were paid between the two of them $275,000 a year plus benefits. Okay, so at the time, that's more or less what we got.
Okay.
You know what I mean? With the city administrator and the mayor, but that was 4 or 5 years ago. There's been quite a difference, in the consumer price index or the inflation rate since then, and I think we do need to do something. This is. Attracting a Dan Horrigan or, somebody of that quality, requires, I would not want to lower that pay. I don't
For
think
the city administrator or
No.
for the mayor?
No,
Are you-
I would not want to lower the city administrator's pay. And, matter of fact, if anything, I would want to raise it.
Yeah.
And I would recommend a smaller increase for the mayor than Councilman Posh, but
What did you recommend? Or what were you proposing in your prior?
Well, I think it ended up being 160 if you had an advanced degree.
And if not,
I think it was
what
something like
it?
a 130 to go to like 160, 155. But I mean, I'd have to go back and look at the notes. But it was in that range. I don't have a problem with 150 salary for a mayor. I mean, I see it's a chief executive officer of an organization that it's a $100 million organization. You need to have someone that's serious about it. A lot of these people that I think are considering on running, they're making that kind of money or close to it already. You wouldn't want to see someone take a pay cut when they're going to be here. I mean, this is a full-time mayor position. I mean, when you're looking at some of these other positions in smaller cities, I don't think it has to be as full-time as this. I mean, we are one of the largest cities in northeastern Ohio, with a lot of challenges right now that we need to work through.
what did you say the mayor's salary was in Lakewood?
I didn't.
Oh, okay. I thought
Just Shaker. So do we want to make a recommendation to all of council then on
There's-
this, or?
There's another
Yeah.
equity component to this piece too. So if let's look at Shaker, for example. You had a part-time position in Shaker. You had people that were high net worth individuals that came from big jobs. Maybe they were retired. I mean, they weren't doing it for the money. I mean, they were coming in and taking a pay cut. There's people in this community that may want to run for mayor that don't have that luxury. They're not in that elite position. I think just from that perspective alone, we need not to think about people that can fill the role and make less than what they're making. I mean, I think we need to have. If you were responsible for $100 million project or $100 million thing, you would be making more money than 110, 115, and you can't overpay, but I could easily justify a $150,000 salary. for someone with that level of responsibility.
Okay.
My feelings.
All right. So the committee members, do we want to recommend that we pass the ordinance with the salaries that are set forth in there, and then also subject to increasing the compensation of the board members, adding the landmark commission, and then with the language changes that I've suggested, making additional compensation subject to council approval.
What's the recommendation for mayor? I'm sorry, I'm-
150,000 for mayor, again, 12.5 for council, and then 16,
and we want to change that to go below
15.5
Yeah, okay.
for council president.
I'd be comfortable with a lesser of a raise for the mayor, but okay with the rest.
We don't need to we don't need to recommend to council, we just could pass it on to them, I believe.
What do you mean?
I mean, we don't need to I don't believe we need to make a recommendation out of this committee that it get passed as is.
Oh, you just say that we'll just debate it on Monday?
We could say that, we discussed that these were our, suggestions. I think the only formal recommendation is that we will address the pay disparity with the chief.
I see, okay.
Mr. Petrus, what do you want to do? Do you want to?
I intended to talk with the law director before this meeting. I wasn't able to talk with him, and so out of abundance for caution, I personally, if we vote on a recommendation, I'm going to recuse myself.
Yeah, all right.
Well, I'm fine with moving the bulk of it forward and then we could have a discussion in committee of the whole about,
The specific salary
Yeah,
numbers?
sure,
Okay,
sure.
all right. Anything else on the Archer salary study or the salary ordinance before we move on? Okay, thank you. Anything before we let you guys go? Thank you.
No, I appreciate your time and
Thank you.
Thanks for your candor.
thank you.
Candor with us.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item on the agenda is our committee, commission, and board vacancies. Before we go into an executive session on that, we have one vacancy on Parks and Recreation, one vacancy on Transportation and Mobility, one vacancy on Aging. I believe we have two vacancies on Aging, but only one applicant. And Fair Practices, we have to appoint an alternate. And then for the Citizens Advisory Committee, we have two vacancies to fill. And for members of the public that are watching, we're going to go into an executive session. Let's commit to come out of that session at
Angel, 1 second.
6:15 to go on to other business.
So we are going to be coming back.
But, before we do that, is there anything, because people may sign off, that on the other that we moved up to have a discussion about? So for example, what's anticipated for Wednesday?
No, I don't have any.
All right, were we going to talk about that at some point?
I mean, we
in the
could,
other
just-
before we conclude?
I think the only thing that's really appropriate for Wednesday is we're trying to schedule a special council meeting for Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. I mean, I don't feel comfortable talking about that unless all our peers are here.
Well, the other thing is until it's posted, and that means it's then official. That's what we're shooting for. We need a council clerk and we need, the tech guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay, so with that said, I guess we will go into an executive session. Can I get a motion for that?
The motion to go into executive session to consider the appointment of a public official.
Is there a second?
I will second that.
Okay, let me call the roll. Councilmember Petrus. President Kuda.
Aye.
Cobb, aye. Okay, we're back on the air out of executive session at 6:15.
It's not there anymore.
Okay.
The next item on our agenda is a continued review of Chapter 111 of our codified ordinances.
So we talked about 11102 and 11103. And I believe we stopped.
No, we actually got down further than that.
Well, we did, but I mean, okay, so we did talk about 1108.
I believe that is where we ended. We had to, I think
But we had significant discussion on 02 and 03.
Did you come to any conclusion?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, we talked about special meetings.
that if there was no quorum, we were gonna put a provision in there that no meeting can go forward.
Right,
Regardless of what you attempt to call it.
right. That was one. One was council president will still or notify, let me see. I can't read my handwriting.
That the agenda was to be set by the,
Well, it says with this, by the council president with the assistance of the council clerk.
okay.
So that was another one. That the notice, instead of the word written notice, that it would be written notice to notify council clerk, so that it's not ambiguous as to who gets the notice. And you know, we talked about whether or not unanimous consent, you know, was necessary, for adding anything. I mean, I don't know if we said it should be or should be a supermajority or anything like that. I remember we talked about it.
Well, as I'm reading this, no other subject can be considered unless all of the members are in attendance and give unanimous consent to
Right.
the consideration.
And we talked about, do we want to keep the unanimous consent or do we want it to be like a majority or supermajority of the members?
I would recommend a supermajority.
I mean, I'm okay with unanimous consent. I mean, the idea is that a special meeting is called for a specific reason. And I think you don't want it to turn into, kind of
Yeah.
a free-for-all. I think that's the idea. But I don't know.
If I could,
Yes.
remind me, did we in the talk, it's been a while since we last talked about this. Did we talk about the mayor's ability to call special meetings in our earlier discussions?
We did in our earlier discussion. And what we said, we don't want to take that away. What we wanted to do was have a very specific way that needs to be done. Because, this idea of calling council people, like, no, we're going to do this through the clerk. And the
Okay.
clerk will notify the council
Okay.
people. Because it just from experience, let's just say it that way, it can get really messy when it happens just any way that the person occupying that office wants it to happen.
I'm just thinking back to my own experience. We had 2 special meetings called by the mayor since I joined council. One was over the summer and one was in December. The one over the summer, my understanding was that the mayor reached out individually to a lot of council members asking whether they were available. He did not reach out to me and ask for my availability. And in December, whenever he called the special meeting, that was another instance where he did not, I'm not sure about other folks, he did not reach out to me. And so I do think that if we're able to put in something that will ensure that, we make a good faith effort to collect people's availability,
Well, again, if we go
assuming
through,
we want them to be productive.
if we go through the council clerk and the council clerk is instructed to notify all members,
Yep.
we don't have to worry about it.
Yep.
Right.
That covers it.
So are you talking about taking out the written notice served personally upon each member or left at the usual place of residence? And
No, written notice to the council clerk.
yeah, but the way it reads now, that's not what it
I
says.
understand that. I'm saying, but we're not taking out the word written notice. We're adding to it to the council
At
clerk.
that, right at that spot, right?
Right.
Okay, that makes sense.
This is, when we say written notice, we've defined written notice to also include email.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, I don't know if we put email, is that, I mean,
Just as long as there's some point where
you
we're
know,
mentioning.
what we want is a public record that, because we don't want to be arguing about whether or not somebody did it right and there's no way to prove
24 hours.
whether or not they did it right
So
or as intended.
if I could, so are we saying here that we are okay with continuing the practice where the mayor can choose the date and time of a special meeting? It's
Yes,
just a matter of changing the notification.
correct.
How do people feel about considering a change where we would try to get the availability of people so that as many people as possible could attend?
Was this closed?
No, come on in.
Public
Doors
discussion.
open. Meeting of the board?
This is administrative services. So, see, this is the thing. I think if 2 council people, let's just say, as it says here, decide to have a meeting and, 4 people don't show up, then, as Craig was saying, we have this clause that's gonna say in the absence of a quorum, no meeting can take place. So that covers, to me, I'm comfortable, I'm okay with the mayor calling it, and if people don't show up, it doesn't happen. I don't think the provision should be that you have to check to see if their people are available. I mean, people could say they're available and then not show up, but but I wouldn't want to take away their right to call the meeting.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I'm separating those things.
Yeah, and it's good that there's that provision that, if you don't have a majority of people, then it doesn't proceed. So.
I mean, that actually already exists in a way, but I think putting it in here explicitly is always a good thing.
Well, I was deeply disappointed. The meeting that the mayor had on the budget at the end of the year was, I couldn't be there. And it was, I don't think, if I recall, you couldn't be there either. You were out of town. Yeah, and it's like you're having what's a critical meeting, and it says, well, the budget book now is everything that happened in that meeting on video. And it's like, no. That makes absolutely no sense. There's no best practice that aligns with that standard.
Well, that wasn't even a council meeting though. At the end of the day, there was no quorum. And what probably should have been done, and it hopefully will be done in the future, is the mayor wants to have an administrative meeting, he'll just have it. And if it's listed as a council meeting and there's no quorum, that should be game over.
Well, it's great that the mayor has a meeting because he wants to communicate with us. And I would want to support that. I just want to make sure that if those meetings are going to happen and there's no quorum, the meeting ends.
That's what Tony's saying.
I did end the meeting. That's the thing. We can't stop the administration from having a meeting. What I'm saying is that should be a noticed meeting as well. If we don't have a quorum, we're going to have this. I don't know if there's any way to actually put wording in that I mean, we could ask the law, I mean, at the end of the day, all this stuff we're going over, every one of these things is gonna be run by the law director. But that's what needs to happen. We need to have a protocol.
One other thing is that with regard to the December meeting, I was out of Ohio visiting family. Even though I was busy, I made a good faith effort to try to be present. I was not afforded the opportunity to join by Zoom, even though that's something that I requested. I think that would be nice to include in here so that, if folks maybe are out of town but are going to make an effort and are interested in being a part of a discussion, even if they can't vote over Zoom, that they, be allowed to join. I'm not sure how we legislate that, but I think
We have
that
that
it's.
note from before.
Insisting on a quorum will help what happened in December. I don't know about, like, in your case, even if you'd been able to access Zoom, there was no quorum.
Right, in that case, that ended. And
Yeah,
so
it
like,
should've ended, yeah.
like you mentioned, it turned into an administrative session and our rules don't apply to that. But at least with regard to the council piece of it.
All right.
We didn't clarify anything. Did we?
Well, we're gonna change the language, right? We're gonna
Through the clerk.
we're gonna put 3, so through the clerk,
In the absence of a quorum, no meeting shall go forward.
clerk prepares the agenda with the council president and in the absence of a quorum. And we're still going to, and just, I don't know, we didn't come to a conclusion about whether we wanted to remain unanimous consent or supermajority. Those are the only two that I would consider, but have at it.
I'm fine with the supermajority, but also unanimous consent. It hasn't been an issue or a problem about other subjects coming up at any of these meetings.
I'm just thinking about
But a lot of things that we never thought would come up have come up.
But here's the thing, let's just say at a proposed meeting that could happen soon. And I mean, it won't apply to this because we're, gotta make the changes, we haven't done that yet. But I'm saying, if something came up during the meeting and we wanted to talk about it and somebody said point of order, that's not on the agenda. And let's just say 5 out of 7 people were like, oh, we need to talk about this, like right now. Do we really want one person saying, no, that's too bad? I mean, that's something to think about because we're there. It's a special meeting, so there's obviously some urgency of some sort. So, that's what I'm thinking about.
I support that.
You just made the case for
For
supermajority.
supermajority, yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we talk about this.
What about making accommodations where possible for people to join remotely?
And participate? Voting, participate?
Not voting.
You can't vote,
Yeah, we
but
can't do
attendance.
that. We can only change it for,
But I mean, there's nothing in our regular meetings, maybe we can put a provision that says a council member may attend any meeting by Zoom, but may not vote.
you know what, we may need a new provision, like, because it should cover regular meetings, it should cover special meetings, it should cover, so why don't we just come up with a 111 point something else?
Okay.
And have a kind of a catch-all.
Well, that can be stuck in, I think, as an addendum to any of these meeting provisions.
Well, but that's the thing, there's 3 of them, And I'm thinking,
Do you want to, amendments,
I mean, I'm looking
you
at,
could add 11131.
I'm saying in the absence of a place we could put this that applies to all council meetings.
You could add section 31 at the very end.
Does that make the most sense though? Would it be advisable to do, like, can you do an A or B up where it says meetings? You know, on council meetings, regular meetings?
Well, you'd have to put it under the first three. You know, you'd have to put a provision under all three. I don't know the best way to do this. I'd ask the law department, but you don't usually see that, you know, where you have to repeat over and over again the same addendum in these individual provisions.
I mean, under the voting section, you could say something like, to reiterate, while they are able to participate remotely via Zoom,
Yeah.
a council member cannot vote.
Let's just leave this to Bill. I mean, just let's bring it up. We definitely want it in. If we end up putting it in all three provisions as the best way, that's fine. If we don't, we need to make it a 11131, then we'll do that. Doesn't matter to me. Do you want to go on to emergency? Which is really the same thing. We notify the clerk and you know, it's the same thing, but we need to change the notification. And I didn't see anything else in there. It's 4 hours, a 4-hour notification. Is there anything with technology here by 4 hours personal telephone? Written notice? I don't know how you do a written notice.
Hand delivered to the residents.
Yeah. Right,
Or if we happen to be here at a meeting, it could be handed to us.
yeah. I guess, I mean, yeah, sure, that should be an option.
Do you have to say anything about having technological assistance available? Because on a short notice like that, who's to say if Steve's not available? And it should be recorded.
You know, we have to ask about the legality of that. What would happen in an emergency if, you know, I would assume we can't call a special meeting unless we have, I mean, Steve's the one that notices the meeting, you know?
That's a logistical problem that we need to get worked out. That what if
Anyway.
Steve were unavailable and Addie is unavailable?
Well, that actually happened. So,
That's right. Was he on vacation last week
Yes.
as well? That's why this meeting wasn't held last week.
Right.
Right.
well, possibly, you know,
Or this, well, I was gonna
Oh, right.
hold this meeting on the 24th.
this meeting. Okay.
Yeah, you recall, I announced it at our last council meeting that it was gonna be last week.
That's correct, that's right.
Yeah, but you're right. I mean, there's a meeting on Wednesday night at 6, so it hasn't been, since Addie's not here, it hasn't been officially announced. But it's a meeting that, you know, Jim Petrus and I called along with Tony for a special meeting. And what was disturbing is, you know, what happens if we have no staff? I mean, do we have no council meetings?
There's no backup for Steve, which is a problem.
I don't know that we have to have them recorded. We have to have minutes. So maybe that's the option if we're not able to.
But who does the
Ideally.
minutes?
I think in the absence of a clerk, maybe one of us would have to. I don't know.
Well, I think that needs to be a question that gets asked with Bill. And I mean, because you typically record the meeting. I mean, the meeting should be recorded at some point.
I think the legal requirement is just minutes though, is that right? If I remember correctly.
You're,
But ideally, of
written
course.
minutes, but I don't think there's any requirement that our meetings be videotaped. But I understand there is a backup person to Steve in an emergency. I don't know who that is. I don't know if that's a contract person that we bring in or if it's someone in our current staff, but
I think he's part-time, that's a word I heard
that
last time.
is something that needs to get addressed if there really was an emergency that required some action.
I mean, maybe there's somebody in the tech department downstairs that could do it, but the question is, does council have the right to use
Ask
that
staff
person?
to do.
Yeah, and then you get into that business.
Okay. We had gone over these before, like 104 quorum, 105 adjournment. Meetings and records, public organization. We had actually, I think we had stopped the last time on 1108, the president. The question being, to what extent is the president authorized to communicate on behalf of all of council?
Right, there was
Or to
that.
speak on behalf of council. I don't believe we ever came to any consensus on that.
I feel like the remedy is that, if a majority of folks feel like the council president is not representing them in their statements, then they could remove the council president and put someone else in. But in terms of, practicality, it just seems that it would be appropriate for that person to have that responsibility, that they could make statements, because there are things where I'm sure the media reaches out to you and others regularly. It's, in my mind, just makes sense for there to be one person that folks could go to.
I mean, individual members are always welcome to say, this guy doesn't speak for me, whoever it is,
Right.
They can, I always look at that as, of course, if I said something, and I'm not just talking about me, but any council president, you were like, I don't agree with that. Of course you could say that, but I don't know, do we want to codify something where the president, what does that even mean, does speak for council?
Go ahead.
So in the school board world, the president of the school board speaks for the school board. And it's important when you are making an announcement. I think it's important to have one body that can speak for everybody at any moment of time, as opposed to conjuring the 7 members together to possibly come up with a statement.
Which you kind of can't do, because then you have to notify everybody, go, is this okay, is this okay?
Right.
And then you're having a meeting.
Well, you'd have to do it in a meeting. You couldn't do it in a
Right,
round robin. And actually, in some of the Ohio Sunshine Law training I've been a part of, there's an example of
Right.
just that, where a majority of people were sharing a document and they released it. There was an issue where this council was, accused of doing things that it didn't do regarding the budget process, okay? There was just blatant misinformation that was spread. And we really needed to have a voice that said, hey, that's not true. And, I don't know if you never felt comfortable with it or you didn't have the authority to do it, but coming from the school board space, if that would have occurred, someone would have put a stop to that. At least would have not put a stop to the action, because you can't stop someone from saying something that's inaccurate, but at least you could be represented. Maybe this is a reason why you had brought multiple times, we need a communications person working for.
Well, what did happen though was I did write a statement. I sent it to the communications department and it was rejected. So it wasn't that I couldn't do it. It wasn't that I didn't do it. It was that, I could have released it to the media, But what I couldn't do was use the city's apparatus, the communications apparatus to do it, because the mayor didn't approve it, so.
If we hire a communications person, we need that communications person to go through one voice, not 7.
Right.
So that's all I'm gonna say. I know you're waiting.
I feel like it's good to put it in here, not to create the responsibility for the council president, but to at least create the authority for the council president so that
option.
you or anyone else could, if something comes up, because I know that there have been instances where it's been questioned, can the council president, make this statement? I think that it would make sense if we were to include something explicitly saying that the council president can. Not that the council president has to.
Right.
And like I said, the remedy is that you can always remove the person, or you as an individual in your individual capacity could say, that person doesn't speak for me.
Let me take a look at what may be out there on some other, cities, because typically the head of a legislative body is empowered to speak on behalf of the body.
Yep.
And then, the council president position has, involved, I understand there was the disagreement, when Melody was president, to what extent she had the authority, and some people were, not in agreement with that. But not just that. I mean, the whole idea of these leadership meetings, that is something new. That never existed before. Where I think by the nature of having this leadership meeting, you are empowered. Whoever is the council president is empowered to speak on behalf of council in the dealings with the mayor. So we do need to, I believe, codify that somehow.
I'm good with it. Makes sense. As long as it says may and not, you have to.
May speak on behalf
Yeah.
of.
And I think we went forward to, I can tell you, I looked this over and stopped at 111.12. So if anybody sees anything before that, the clerk of council thing, we just did that. I didn't see a need to change anything in this, but I wanted it clear. I don't know if we ever put anything in here that just made it clear that the council clerk works for all the council, but that reports to the president does the.
I know we went back and forth on it. It hasn't been a problem to my knowledge.
I don't think it's been a problem. But you just have to think about, you get into a situation where maybe some council president wants to limit access to somebody they don't get along with that well. I'm not saying it will happen, but I would like somebody to be able to say, if they felt for some reason they weren't getting serviced by that clerk, if there's something they can point to and say, I have a right to get help with this legislation, or I don't know, some research or something they wanted the clerk to do. I mean, I'm not looking for trouble.
We went back and forth when we drafted this provision originally, and the consensus at that time was not to put something like that in here.
I don't know. I'm just revisiting it. Does anybody else have a concern about that? That there's nothing in there that says that the clerk is to provide services to all council members?
Well, I think to me, the most important part is it says she or he shall be subject to the supervision of the president of council or president designee. And then in the job description, I believe that we did mention the fact that other council members could request research or help with legislation, right? So do you think it needs to be codified?
I just didn't want the council president to be able to limit anything that the clerk does. And if that would be I'm just trying to preempt a problem that could happen down the road.
I'm thinking of a scenario where, sometimes it's helpful to have Addie at my committee meetings.
Right.
Sometimes it's not necessary. There was one committee meeting where it was a walking tour of the Boulevard neighborhood. It was very helpful having her there. I feel like it's probably unlikely that a council president would tell a clerk, no, you're not supposed to work with, individual council members. But I suppose I could see how it would be nice to have that protection. I'm not sure exactly what we'd want to include, but with regard to that walking tour, it would have been very difficult if we didn't have her.
We wouldn't have done it.
I just look around the city, around the county, and in almost every case that's going through my head right now, there's somebody who doesn't like somebody else.
Right.
And I don't know how that plays out, but I don't think it should play out where that person is isolated from the use of the clerk.
Right.
That person is not there to service just the council president.
Right.
I get the supervision part and I get the evaluation part. You can't supervise somebody with some people can't supervise somebody. And who used to say, I report to 7, I have 7 bosses? Was that Tanisha? I mean, I know it had nothing to do with the clerk, but it was that,
Yeah.
something.
Is there an argument against including something like that in there?
I don't think Craig liked it.
No, there isn't. I'm just, looking where do you put something?
Well, you have your
Like
last
that.
sentence of a paragraph and describing the clerk's responsibilities.
Yeah,
You start out by saying the clerk shall also perform such other duties as are required by law or are required by the charter, these codified ordinances or any other ordinances. It could be that become a long sentence, but it could be a sentence preceding that legalese stuff that says the clerk shall also help or assist other council members in their duty in.
Or like as well as assisting
Yeah.
council members.
I thought of it. The
that
problem
little
with
bit.
that is though, do we create a problem when someone is going beyond what is reasonable and putting a demand on the clerk?
See, but I think that's where the council president steps in, and I think it's clear that that's where the council president can step in, because the clerk reports to the council president. So if that person came to the council president and said, I think legally, it'd say, listen.
All right, then go ahead and finish.
Well, I'm just saying, look, I think this is a reasonable amount of time. I think that's unreasonable.
If the concern is, and maybe I misheard it, that a vindictive council president could tell the clerk, don't do this for this person, the prohibition ought to go into limiting the council president's ability.
Become circular.
It does. I think we're in search of a problem where there isn't one.
I agree there is not one. I don't agree that it's unlikely there won't be one. I would say, I wouldn't call it likely, but there's too many.
Something, the words of the effect, council president shall not restrict any council members' access to or use of the clerk.
Reasonable. Just get the reasonable in there. Reasonable access.
We'll wordsmith that. How about that? Does that work for everyone?
Yeah.
So, there's he and his all over this business. So we probably just, as a general thing, we want the law department to gender neutralize this whole 111 thing. Looking at committees,
Remember, I have drafted amendment to this, breaking this down in the council committees and then our other boards and committees and commissions. That is, I think it's posted to our agenda for this meeting. Again, I've got to submit that to the law department.
I like it a lot. Thank you.
Yeah, you know, one thing under the committees, you know, it says President shall appoint members of the committees, and the member first name shall act as chairman of the committee when the president does not attend. Why is that in there? Because like, whether I attend or not, just for instance, you know, I think I have to make them. I mean, I don't know
why that's in there.
I don't know what I would have to do to take over somebody's committee. Like, I know I have the power to do that.
Desires
But
to so act.
Yeah, but like, I guess the council president just says that. But the mere presence of the council president, I don't believe that's the intention of when the council president runs a committee meeting.
No, it says that if you attended a meeting, that in and of itself doesn't make you the chair. It's, quote, if you desires to so act.
But when you read that sentence I just read, it says president shall appoint members of the committees and the member first name shall act as chairman of the committee when the president does not attend. I mean, that kind of intimates that when the president does attend, he or she is the chair. I mean, the way it reads, and that's not true. This is not a true statement.
I agree with that.
I'm here right now. I'm not chairing the meeting.
Well, do we want to delete the chairman provision?
Well, are we working off of your proposed amendment?
I don't have it in front of me. Do you have it pulled up?
I do, yeah.
Because I think, did I just leave that in there or did
I think you-
wordsmith it or made some changes?
The president shall appoint members of the committee first named when the president does not attend an act. Oh, shall act as chairman.
Yeah, why don't
I
we
like
just
your
take,
language better.
all right, I don't remember the language that I used, but
You said, in the absence of provision to the contrary, the president shall appoint members to the committee and the member first name shall act as chairman of the committee when the president does not attend and act. That is definitely a lot cleaner than what's currently there.
I'll take a look at it and I'll address that concern.
Thanks. It's nonsensical right now.
We'll clean it up.
That's nonsensical and that's not how we've been operating.
No, I know, but it's like, you know what I'm thinking about right now? I should be musing at a meeting, but it's just, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that I recommended happen in between 2019 and 2021 because, you know, once this was passed, the government knew they had to make transitional changes. And anyway, here we are, so let's go. I mean, I'd like to get this done, in the next month or so we can have the law department review it. The business of council, I looked through this whole thing and it is the way we do this. Miscellaneous business, there's your catch-all at the end. I I never thought, oh, we ought to change the order. Because we get to the communication with residents usually pretty quickly. I mean, that's kind of like the main thing. You don't ever want to make people sit around for a long period of time. Now, you know, if there were regular reports from directors, let's just say, you know, in the future, somebody, you know, wants, I don't know, like that could lengthen the time between the beginning of the meeting and that's something, this could be changed at any time, you know. And this could be changed, you know, it could be changed at a meeting. You could amend the, you know, I mean, to me, just the fact that you have the ability, council has the ability to amend the agenda, we don't really, unless there's something structural wrong with the way it is now, just having the ability to amend the agenda at a meeting kind of solves any problems that might be anecdotal problems.
Because you don't want to lock in an agenda that's so codified that you can't move things around or recognize that there might be a whole bunch of people. Maybe you need to amend the agenda to put public comment before administer. I mean, it just gives you the components of that agenda with the president and the clerk being able to establish how it will appear.
Yeah.
And if you want a time limit.
I think it's fine. We're gonna do a hard stop here in 4 minutes.
Could I bring up one issue about 1113?
Yes.
So, you know, this is the council shall act by ordinance and or resolution. And then, you know, we had the kind of MOU debate kind of ad nauseum. I mean, I don't want to have that debate, but what I want to know is everybody, I mean, if this is it, if this is what we agree on, that this is how council speaks, ordinances or resolutions, then there really shouldn't be anything else. Now, is the idea that anything else is not binding, so it doesn't count? Is that how we landed on this, Craig?
You mean with the MOU before? or-
With the MOU and any other kind of, you know, thing that council does that's not a resolution or an ordinance, is it just that it's non-binding and so don't worry about it?
This makes it clear, just like a court only speaks through a written journal entry, council only speaks through ordinances or resolution adopted by a majority vote. Anything else is not binding.
So that's just understood. And so there's really no reason to put anything else here, right?
I don't believe so. Ordinance and resolution, every ordinance. Yeah. Anything else is not binding. So for example, if we were to talk about something about how we're gonna conduct our business in a committee of the whole and the consensus in the table is, yeah, orally, technically that wouldn't be binding on us unless we formally motioned and passed it.
So for the next meeting, if I might, I think that 1116, 1117, uh, 11, -25 and 11128 all need, let me just flip the page. Yeah, those all need to be revised. I mean, obviously, we're not gonna get into that now, But I think with that.
Yeah, give me those numbers again, I'm gonna.
Sure. 111, 16, 17. And this is what I'm saying. I mean, you guys certainly have at it with others. 24, 25.
I'm sorry, you had 16,
16, 17, 24, 25, and 28. In my view, those all need to be revised.
24,
And
and
that-
28.
Not so 24, 25, and 28. And not so much 24, because 24 says, you know, hey, if it's not in here, you know, we go to Robert's Rules of Order. But what I am thinking about is, you know, let's be a little more explicit about conduct violations and penalties, you know. I mean, regardless, there'll be things that won't be covered in 111 in general, and then Robert's Rules is going to kick in. But I don't know about the whole blank tablet here. You know, that's a little, you know, I think we should at least look at it.
Guess it's a good spot to stop.
Yep. Look.
Okay. Folks, it's now a minute after 7 o'clock. We're going to adjourn the meeting. Thank you if you're still watching.